Hello, today I am doing a video presentation for my class POL134 on the idea of political oppression in the United States. So I have some notes I'm going to go off. Now, the idea of political oppression, most people just connect that to the use of censorship by government, but it goes beyond that, and especially in the United States. Now, in many other places of the world, like Europe, Australia, the UK, well, in Europe, Southern American countries, etc., a lot of their governments pass anti-freedom of speech bills. Well, laws. Like in Australia, Bill 18C. That's just one of the examples. And in the UK with Tommy Robinson getting thrown in prison for reporting outside a court. Yeah. Alright, so if the government in America isn't trying to oppress its citizens politically, who is? Now, you might say, oh, terrorist organizations. No, that's ridiculous. That's something the right would say. The evangelicons. Yeah, great. But private firms are actually doing it. And the Constitution was to protect citizens not only from the government, but from private entities as well. Whether those were derivatives of government-run enterprises or if even a collective of individuals formed it. The ideas within the Constitution still reach upon them. Anyone who is legally a citizen or any firm or government entity within the state, within that nation of the United States. So you might be asking, okay, well, how is media firms suppressing people's ability to speak? Well, you see this particularly with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, the algorithm system. So essentially it promotes users who have a more family-friendly approach to things, while it's pushing other creators who have supposed terrible ideas, to the back. Or they're even censoring them, demonetizing them, essentially stripping them away of all, their livelihood, their monetary, how they can pay for things because of the sky-high taxes. Even in the US, now they can't do that. They need to get a job. When before they had an audience online, that income's being taken away from them. And when you see corporate deals on YouTube with like Fox News, CNN, all that stuff, you start to get a clearer picture. The alt media is using a new form of technology to communicate to consumers. And when I say that, I'm not talking about a bunch of boomers. What I'm talking about is millennials, Gen Zers, some Gen Xers. Well, why? Well, more individuals my age, for example, watch something like Netflix, right? Rather than turn on the TV to watch something. Compared to, maybe, let's say, the older generations, which still rely heavily on the corporate media, aka TV firms, cable, and even some of these older net websites, maybe like the Washington Post, those kinds of firms. Now, it works good for them to go and work in cahoots with Google, which they can have more monetary agreements. If you give us this position on YouTube, we'll give you a bunch of money, basically push our videos ahead of everyone else's. Alright, we'll do that. There's, big economic reasons. Millions and millions would get spent. Smaller firms can't really do this. Maybe some BuzzFeeds, if you will, but they're starting to downsize their offices. Because they're a lot slower in nature and there's a lot more bureaucracy involved. They can't just record a video and upload it like what I can. By no means, do I call this a professional space, but it's cost effective. This doesn't cost me a lot of stuff. It doesn't require high costing cameras. It doesn't require a studio. It just requires someone with a camera and a microphone to go on. A lot of these other firms, they're pumping all this money and giving these, people who work for them, these journalistic firms, these cable firms, 6-7-figure salaries, even five figures accurate, but 6-figure salaries, 7-figure salaries. And it's just a really slow way to kind of kill yourself if you're a firm online now. Because, for example, you don't have to be professional anymore. As long as you have an interesting idea, people can listen. There's a reason why people go online, because the cable is boring. What do you get on cable? Ooh, some scrubbed stuff, some family-friendly stuff. Online you can find that. You know what else you can find online? Well, you can stream those services already. Yeah, we'll go into, CNN's news page. We'll go into Fox News' webpage, yeah. You can go to YouTube too. You can look up people shooting heroin. You can look up all these different ideas that people might have, regardless of whether they're, pardon me, alt-right, or if they're crazy loony leftists. Now, they are blatantly violating the Constitution, because the Constitution, well, these big alt-tech sites and corporate media firms, these private, for-profit entities, not because they enjoy doing the stuff they do, because they want money. Hence why, get funds from Hillary Clinton. And the DNC, that is. The First Amendment clearly protects freedom of the press. Now, what is the press? Most people think, the press is newspaper, newsprint, television, and they typically think of these big firms. However, the term press means any form of communication that isn't verbal, talking from one person to another. Now, it can be verbal in the sense of audio playback, like what I'm doing now. Right now, I am engaging in activities of the press. Might be a Facebook post. It might be I write something on a wall in a subway station. It could be this video. It could be a web article. It could be all kinds of different things. If you engage in that, if you're writing about an idea, you're engaging in the press. Okay? What's happening is you have these private firms starting to say, this group is extreme. We can't allow this. They're promoting hate speech. Blah, 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 which hate speech is subjective. The only grounds that cover hate speech are slander and a credible threat of violence. Hence, you're in a crowded theater and you yell fire, well, there's a chance someone's going to get hurt, isn't there? Or if you say, I am going to go to your house and kill you. But if I say, I am going to go to your house and drop 10 nukes and raise a zombie army and get Hillary Clinton and Courtney Love to visit you with a shotgun and, turn you into Kurt Cobain, that is an incredible threat of violence. So, slander and credible threat of violence are the limitations to freedom of speech. Which all of these supposed alt-right, which they aren't alt-right. Give me a break, Alex Jones is an alt-right. The supposed alt-right extremist groups aren't proposing those things. So most people generally perceive channels like, for example, Alex Jones as extreme, and they go, okay, let's find they're censored. Well, where do you draw the line? The line gets blurry after that. Do you consider some centre-right individual a far-right person? Do you then consider a libertarian far-right? I mean, a lot of these private firms are insinuating that if you're for freedom of speech, if you're against unlimited migration, if you're for defending freedom of speech in the Constitution, pro-firearm, you must be some alt-righter. You must be some bigoted, racist, sexist. If you don't absolutely hate Trump, even if you're not a big fan of him, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're a racist. Which is absurd because a Nazi needs to be a state capitalist, an ethno-nationalist, and have one unopposed leader. So that's closer to socialism, if you ask me. But besides from that, these private firms are using one excuse. They're providing themselves with the power, because if they can censor one person, they're going to start giving excuses to go, oh, we'll censor this person, we'll censor that person. Oh, this person has, hate speech, blah, blah, blah. And what you see is, for creating a monopoly, they're using censorship. Because even if you are an alternative online creator, and you're an SJW, if you have blue hair and you're saying, man, men are cucks. No, they support cucking, actually. Men are these, gross faggots, blah, blah, blah. Oh, these white people, ugh. Kill the whites, essentially. Although, they're like ethno-nationalists. So, yeah, they're supposedly far left, but they're, kind of right-wing. But then next, what can solve this problem is either providing an internet Bill of Rights to uphold the Constitution, so then it isn't up to subjectivity, because the press changes over time. 100 years ago, the main form of communication wasn't online. It wasn't a computer like what I'm recording off now. It wasn't on my phone, right? They couldn't instantly engage in activities of the press. They had to do it through newsprint, for example. Or a radio broadcast. Maybe not 100 years ago, maybe a little bit later than that. But I'm sure you get the point. What I'm getting at. Now the average is online. Most people engage in activities of the press online. That needs to be protected. Or alternatively, if you don't want that, you can make the internet a public utility. Now, when you do that, you're starting to blur the lines. Blur the lines between, okay, this is a private firm. They have the right to kick someone off their platform because someone voluntarily agreed upon their terms of service to use their product. However, when it's used for political oppression, that's when you can draw the line. But then the government might use that to their power. The government might start introducing, legislation to censor certain groups they don't like. So when you make something a public utility, you protect it from private entities exploiting people's rights. However, when you make it a public utility, what's saying the government isn't going to do the same thing? Now, ideally, the Supreme Court should hold up the values of the First Amendment in the Constitution. Well, all the other amendments too, of course. But they're not doing that. The best next step, besides creating a public utility or antitrust legislation to stop these firms from forming monopolies, but it's not going to completely solve it. There's a whole bunch of loopholes between that. Is an Internet Bill of Rights. Now, one of the outcomes of political oppression in the United States, or anywhere in the world, but we're focusing on the United States here, is prevents debate and the growth of ideas. Now, let's say, for example, now, I'm not some fucking far-righter, okay? But let's just say I'm like, man, fuck the Jews, we should get them out of the country, we'll kill them all. We need an ethno-state, man, yeah, that's what we need. If I hold those views, and I go out in the street, and I decide I'm going to start rambling on about these views, most people are going to look at you and call you a fucking idiot. And rightfully so. because you're expressing yourself. But how come when someone decides, let's do this online, it's a different story? You're not going to be able to change that person's mind if you're not allowing them to speak their mind. If you say, no, you can't say this, you can't say that, well, who do they have to espout this view to? Other people like themselves. They can find certain far alt-right websites that then they can form a little communal group, which then could lead to becoming an extremist movement and cause terror attacks. Remember the 80s? Yeah, all those Christian terrorist groups in America. It's not just the groups from the Middle East. Yeah, all kinds of religious groups do that. So, essentially, it creates echo chambers, where no one can challenge these certain ideas that individuals make. And in a society, that's very dangerous, because how can full political discourse run without the ability to discuss ideas and let them grow, to formulate new policy, essentially? And that is why the idea of censorship is a slippery slope to not only oppression at the moment through private firms, but through giving the government the ability to censor its citizens. I mean, currently you already see the government breaking all different kinds of amendments, the Second Amendment, that other amendment, I think it's the 7th or 8th, I can't remember, to do with, government can't spy on you, essentially. Obamacare was only being able to pass because it was considered a tax. So it kind of used the Constitution as a loophole. You see this all the time with politics, but I guess this is a good example of how not only the government can provide political oppression, but so can these firms that provide political funding to all of these neoliberal and neoconservative campaigns that you see in the Republican and Democratic Party. Your Mike Pence's, your John McCain's, your Hillary Clinton's, establishmentarian cucks, essentially.